So welcoming you to this exploration of vision and purpose. I'm just delighted that that you've all shown up. We are we're wanting to present something that's very near and dear to us, which is this blending of StarWisdom and Sophia.
Right.
Which is another way of saying, what is the sacred union between heaven and earth? between light and matter, between really in a way between vision and purpose. And how is it that we can continue to weave those two onto different kinds of templates and maps and continue to be relevant to these times and to the challenges? Okay, I think we're there. StarWisdom and Sophia. These two images are one of the ways of looking at this conversation. Obviously, the beautiful starry night sky, and then this image of the mother in the earth, grounded, rooted into the beautiful tree with the dove coming through the sky and deep roots and a hint of water and this radiance. This is an image that was designed by a friend of mine as I was working with the Sophia lineage idea some years ago. And I still find it one of my favorite depictions of Sophia as this sense of the emerging feminine. So this is a conversation that David and I carry on in much of our work together.
Daily.
And that is probably rooted in all of what Starhouse has brought to the world, and certainly the design of how does cosmos connect to Gaia Sophia, to Sophia in the embodiment. So I would like to invite you to one of our most favorite images. I'm going to touch on this. This is an adaptation of something that some of you have done, some of the courses we've done before have seen a version of this concentric circle model. In this instance, we've included the 12 zodiacal signs around the outside, and the idea that when we work with different templates and when we work individually as well as collectively, there's something here that is reflected in what we want to share tonight. Partly we're wanting to start building this bridge between how to become more connected to working with Washington, D.C. as a city of the stars. This is an intro to that. We'll touch on it, but mostly we wanted to introduce some of the directions we'd like to go, and also to end up with a meditation that we could do towards holding and supporting Washington, D.C. as it's moving through a certain kind of rebirth, threshold crossing, enormous challenge, and has been challenged over these last years, and certainly as of the January 6th imagery that so many people in the world are still processing. This sense that there was a breach of the temple or an overrunning of a temple, and from another point of view, these were people saying, this is my place, I can do what I want. This is a place of the people. We're not wanting to confuse our conversation with the spiritual impulse by bringing in a political stance. It's really important to me that we start finding this higher note of how to work with the temple and the template that is Washington, D.C. in such a way that it can be held in high vision, that the patterning of the city and of particularly the National Mall can somehow be held as sacred space.
Okay, this is normally we orient to the world. Our orientation is mostly horizontal. We look at a scene and we say, oh, person on the bicycle, interesting. Oh, are there pigeons? Oh, interesting. And the people in the middle, interesting. So what's going on there? Oh yeah, buildings. So we normally orient to the horizontal. That's most of where we orient. I mean, watch this in yourself. However, most of the sphere of your existence is if you imagine a sphere around yourself, only this middle band, so to speak, is the horizontal where you spend most of your attention, but most of that sphere is above or below the horizontal. Here's a map of the below. It's a hypothesis. It is a version of what is below on the earth. It is, when they say the map is not the territory, it's very helpful to remind yourself, looking above and below. We're now looking below onto the earth. Here's another map of the below that's a bit deeper. These are geological formations of the same area. Here's a map of the above. The above has been mapped as well. And it has its own virtues, just like a road map of the below, of the earth. This is a map of the above. Here's a map of the above in close in detail. You say, well, this is an astrological chart. I don't know how to read that. Yeah, that's right. You don't know how to read most maps. You have to learn how to read a map. And this is a one that we spend time with in our work. Maybe it's better to look at it this way. So Jupiter in this orange color, Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, the planet Saturn with his blue color. They do a dance where they come together in the sky once every 20 years. It just happened, December 21st. Now they're moving apart. It was actually a huge privilege to be able to observe that. The Jupiter-Saturn starts a new chapter of Earth history, and it's 20 years long. This one had a dance with Pluto. Pluto, the dark planet. I wish I could have, I tried very much to reject Pluto as a planetoid. The astronomers said, this isn't really a planet, it's a planetoid. It's really not big enough. And I said, I agree, it's just so far away. But then I did the research about how Pluto works into the lives of people, into world events. And now I highly respect Pluto. And oftentimes when people say, gee, I want an astrological reading, you open it up and, oh, well, that's because Pluto, your sun is on Pluto is grinding down on the birth position of your sun or something like that. Frequently. So there's this dance about Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. That dance hasn't occurred when Jupiter and Saturn come together every 20 years, and then on top of Pluto dancing about, not since the 13th century. So we go back to this map, and I'll talk you through some of it. In the outer wheel, maybe just use our little that's because that's why that's there. So funny. Okay, in the outer wheel, when someone wants to come in, it actually makes it impossible to do these things. Okay, so in the outer wheel, wow. I'm just going to talk you through it. I'm not going to even try to use little drawing techniques, but I will use this. In the outer wheel is what's happening right today, the inauguration day. And that's the location of the sun. This is Saturn, this is Jupiter. All of that occurred on December 21st. Saturn and Jupiter were right on top of the Pluto position of the Declaration of Independence. The StarWisdom people in our group have been watching this closely for a year, and we said, this is going to be a rough ride. Predictions are always complicated, and actually we don't like to make them because most people will say, well, you were wrong, it wasn't exactly the way you said. But I think it's safe to say this is a rough time. And dear friends, I'll tell you, this is Pluto in the sky. This is Pluto at the Declaration of Independence. This Pluto is moving this way. It's going to be right on top of Pluto of the Declaration of Independence, which is going to open up the dark hatch of looking down into the shadow part of this country in 2024. And there will be a whole bunch of stuff happening in 2022 at the midterm elections. Oh my God. And we think this is really strong because we want to train you in skills to be able to read the map above, read the map below, and then work them in your personal life, because we need everybody to be strong. And you need skills for that. So the prediction is that there are rough times as we actually deal with opening up into the shadow space of this country and look deeply in. And then we have the opportunity of dealing with that, which is a huge opportunity, actually.
So I'm going to stop the share for a minute and just do a little thank you for that. I just want to revisit everything David just said now without the images. So we're talking about maps. We're talking about the horizontal, the vertical, and the sense that Hermes Trismegistus, reportedly said, as above, so below, that there's a reflection, right, of what happens both in us cosmically, we are our own astrological map, and in looking at these overlapping maps of the Declaration of Independence and where the stars are now. So how are the stars speaking? What's happening? How are we responding? What does the Declaration of Independence have to do with the soul of the nation, with the growing up of the nation? How do we start finding those associations of the way a country grows up that are similar to the ways we grow up?
Right.
Like, what if there's actually not anything really wrong going on? What if there's a challenge, particularly in relationship to this Pluto aspect? And also that we're a young country kind of coming into a sense of vision and purpose as a nation.
So many people want things to go back to normal. But would you say that to a fifth grader? A fifth grader says, gee, I want everything to be like it was in fourth grade. That's normal. If I could just go back to fourth grade, and we just have ice cream on Friday nights or whatever is normal, let's just go back to normal. And Lila is saying, well, actually, let's grow up.
Let's keep growing up, show up and grow up, and that's a process. So we are looking at how does Washington, D.C. enter into this conversation? How might we as a circle of people, and I'd love for you to, if questions come up, we'll talk for a bit, and then we'd love to have a little bit more of an interaction with people.
Let's show our favorite map of the world.
So if you have inquiries that come up, please, jot them down so that we can have a little bit of a dynamic engagement. There's something about DC that has a very specific connection to the stars. One of my favorite books that in the Goddesses of America course that will start in a couple of days that I reference a lot is by David Oveson, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital. And in the introduction, it talks about how there are so many zodiacal wheels within Washington, D.C. He's found way over 30 when he was doing this research, which was more than he ever found in New York or Paris or London. Mm-hmm. And, he said, this is basically my research. This is what I do for fun, is to, find how cities engage with astrological maps. And he said he's never found as many anywhere as existed in Washington, D.C. And that there is something, over 30, and many of them are in the National Mall. Right. And that indicates a kind of marriage, because many of the wheels they're not just like placed, they're actually parts of statues, they're indicators, there's conversations going on. And it sort of implies that DC is a city of the stars, and that it was intended from the Masonic foundations that sort of helped lay some of the literal foundation stones of various buildings. There's a whole mystery of that. We can just barely indicate it in the time we have tonight, but it's a fascinating identification with the fact that there are cities, this city in particular, that was meant to be in relationship to the stars. So we're going to pause for a minute in the Declaration of Independence, having just been named in David's previous image of where the astrology is.
Well, first off, you need to learn how to do calligraphy like this. Isn't that beautiful writing?
We the people.
I mean, just the structure and the proportions of these movements, these lines. Yes, go ahead.
So, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them.
Laws of nature. Laws of nature's God.
So we love this excerpt because it brings in something that we often forget when we're in these challenges, that there are laws of nature and that they were included as part of the Declaration. That a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the courses which impel them, the causes which impel them to this separation. So this reflection of nature and of nature's God is a voice that needs to be woven into this bigger conversation of where are we as a planet, where are we with climate change, where are we with some of the bigger issues that face the planet. But in this, we wanted to start building the bridge between the Declaration of Independence, the astrological map, the Pluto influence that I think we all sense in the challenges that are facing all of us and the country and the world. So we're wanting to kind of discern these different maps.
Right. Let's see if that works.
So here's another map. This is called the Macmillan map. I love this because it reminds me of many things. One thing it reminds me of is a Klimt painting. It's like
the kiss?
Yeah, like sort of like,
okay,
you
great.
know, if the stars kissed, a city, maybe it would look like this.
That's beautiful.
So this is a 1901 version of the National Mall. And you start to see in this clearly, there was nothing random about the design. It has a lot of the aspects and elements that Pierre L'Enfant designed in the late 1700s when he was commissioned by Jefferson, Washington, to create a layout in a swamp area where there was really no one living there except cows, and Foggy Bottom was all swampy, and it was a pretty unlikely place for a nation's capital to be envisioned. And the story of how that got to be is a whole level of intrigue with Hamilton and Jefferson, and it goes on and on.
And she can go on and on.
And I won't. Okay, so here we are. I wanted to do this layout because it's so beautiful, and it also gives you the outline of what exists today in a very artistic way.
In an outline, and it also shows the underlying reliance on the vertical, which is actually north-south, exact north-south, the horizontal, exact east-west, and the proportions use the golden mean proportion. And so this is an activated place. Most people don't know about it. They just want to go see the museums or whatever they want to do. But what you can access here is the underlying power of the geometry of the heavens, boom, brought down to earth.
So to orient you, this is the National Mall. The square in the center, the small square, is where the Washington Monument obelisk is, which is 555 feet tall, right there in the heart of the cross. Up here to the north is the White House. Directly south, down here, is the Jefferson Memorial, which is surrounded by water, very, very beautifully placed.
Yeah, so we'll see that in another map.
And then off to the right, over here, the red dot is the Capitol building called the Temple of Freedom.
Temple of Freedom.
Actually, Nancy Pelosi is the first person I've heard in this aftermath of January 6th, where she actually said our Temple of Freedom has.
Which is how Jefferson referred to it.
He always referred to it as a Temple of Freedom. And I was feeling like it was a name I now have adopted as how I think
Maybe
of the
Nancy
Capitol.
got it from you.
I think she got it from Jefferson. And then over here in the West, I'm pretty sure Nancy and I are not on first name basis. So over here in the West, on the far left, is the Lincoln Memorial. And this cross that you see in front of the Lincoln Memorial is actually pretty much how the reflecting pools have ended up. So a lot of this is in place, 2 miles east to west. So this is how the map actually now looks when you translate it from the 1901 version to a modern map. You see the tidal basin is got left as water here in the south, and the Jefferson Memorial is still there, but now you stand at that memorial and look out on water. But otherwise, you get the reflecting pools here with Lincoln. The Washington Monument did not land in the direct center.
And there are good reasons for that, which we're not going to go into.
Yeah, it is, in my estimation, the spiritual center, and it's definitely on the east-west line, but it's not in the north-south center, which it was in the Macmillan map. And then going all the way over here, there we are at the Capitol again. So why are we going through all this? For some people, this is, very familiar. For other people on the call, maybe not so. But we wanted to give a little bit of the horizontal map now in relationship to time, like where did some of these principles that the founders and the visionaries of this country, where did they get their designs, and why? And why does it matter? Does it matter? I'm kind of wildly passionate about this, and I'm still discovering why it matters. So we're not here to tell you why it matters, but we have some thoughts about it. And I think that this upheaval that we're experiencing right now is actually so incredibly vital to understanding sort of the threads of history that got us here. I just want to pause and also say this is obviously Martin Luther King Day as well. So the spirit of this great being and what he brought to the visions of freedom and to the impact that slavery and all of the turmoil that's also coming up in this period of time around Black Lives Matter. It's all like all of this soup and swirl is relevant. And it's relevant to these two buildings. Okay, so the Lincoln Memorial was, so remember Lincoln's off there in the west. That memorial building was patterned after the Parthenon, because I mean, it's so obvious in this picture. And it's this fascinating, the Parthenon, in Athens, was dedicated to Athena as the goddess of wisdom. So that's just interesting to note. Okay, down on the bottom is the Jefferson Memorial.
On the right.
Yeah, and you can kind of, it's not as an obvious, but you see the the relationship to the dome to the left.
The dome part here. This is the entry here to the Pantheon. That's the dome, which relates to this dome.
So the Pantheon in Rome was the dedication to all of the gods and goddesses of Rome. So we got this Greek-Roman connection echoing the Republic and democracy and all these things. And the interesting, reflection is that the democracy and some of the principles that were echoing in the architecture of the National Mall were heavily, involved with slavery and military might of Rome. And, it's like the foundations of what we choose also comes with the history, with questionable history that we need to acknowledge. We sort of think of, Greece and Rome as these great examples of successful republics and democracies. Not really true. Do you want to admit that person? Mm-hmm. So the architecture, the horizontal map, the history, where we've come from is reflected. So just a little visit here to some of the other statues. This is on the left, the Washington Monument, looked at from the perspective of the south of the Jefferson Memorial. So you see the water in front. The top image and the image on the far right are both the Capitol building. See the goddess of freedom on the top, upper right corner, the black statue on top of the dome. And the middle picture on the bottom is related to the Library of Congress and is a picture of wisdom. So this is a quote I wanted to read because it just speaks so loudly and more eloquently of something that is also relevant to the overlay of meaning to the city. Washington, D.C. is simultaneously a hymnal and a history book.
That's beautiful.
A shrine and a university. A prayer and a symphony. It's a memorial to truth in a culture of lies, a beacon of freedom in a world of tyranny, a ray of hope in the darkness of despair. That's James Wasserman, The Secrets of Masonic Washington. And I think that says a lot. It's not just only talking about the US. I mean, we're on a planet where there are lies, and lies came up really strongly in some of your astrological work.
Absolutely. The power of lies and how lies actually transfer into microbes. That's esoteric.
So this is like the weaving of how do we hold the paradoxes of what's possible, what's the vision of the nation, what's the vision of the nation as we see it in the astrological chart of the nation, as we see it in the architecture, as we see it in the design of the city and the mall itself. And one of the questions I hold, are we waiting for somebody else to come along and activate that vision? Or is that partly what we're meant to be doing? I obviously feel strongly that we have something to say in this conversation. And that's partly why I've loved what Robert Shibakazi, Brian Gray, and David have been doing in the conversation with the stars and the destiny of America and all, because it's all related, but there's a mystery here. Okay, this is my favorite girl. I have a little version of her right here, actually. But, I kind of keep her close by. She's come from several of the journeys that we've taken in through Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Lila leads journeys through sacred Washington, which is, I felt embarrassed at, thinking I had discounted all that politics stuff and I didn't want anything to do with it, but actually going right to the heart and realizing the heart is organized in a sacred manner. and it's meant to be connected to,
And conversed with.
conversed with.
Like, what's the conversation opportunity that we each can have with the archetypes in stone, including the architecture, but the amazement of the statuary as you discovered them, you know, all through the National Mall. So this is the goddess of freedom. She stands in the left image. She's on the very top of the Capitol, on top of the dome.
On the very left, you see it, the little
black spot
little
there.
black. That's 19 feet tall. That little black spot at the top of the Capitol.
Yep.
You can hardly see it from the ground, but it's there.
She weighs 15,000 pounds. She's on top of the dome, which is actually constructed to be 9 million pounds. So it's a, you know, this is a significant building. She was sculpted by Thomas Crawford. That's a whole story in itself. He was a fascinating and beautiful human being. You see her in the dark bronze statue when she was taken down from the Capitol in 1993 during Clinton's administration so she could be cleaned. I think she'd been up there for, 140 years uncleaned. So I think everybody was happy.
The weather does a pretty good job.
And she's a beautiful being. As I've spent a fair amount of time with this statue, I've come to think of her, some of you may recognize the term the folk soul. For me, in my heart, she is the folk soul of this country. She's patterned very much after a Native American influence. Some people feel strongly that the only true democracy that we can look to in the history of the world, or one example, is the Iroquois Nation. And that was one of the strong influences, both in her design and as well as the influence to Franklin and Jefferson, particularly, who really valued what the Iroquois elders brought. Again, another tributary we could spend time on.
What's on her head?
What is on her head? If you look to the right, the image in white is the plaster cast that you can get close up to. You see it in the bottom right picture in the visitor center. And on her head is it's a helmet, but it's made to look like the eagle is sort of coming right out of her crown chakra. But it's a full-blown eagle, full feathered, and you can really see it close up in the white plaster cast. You can get up behind her head and get, within 10 feet of this massive, 2.5 foot headgear. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. The plaster cast itself carries a very, very strong presence, and was discovered in the basement of the Smithsonian some years ago, and they kind of dusted her off and put her in the visitor center in the way you see it on the bottom right. So she stands 19 feet and is really the radiance of something that captures this particular phrase that I'll read here from Vivian Green. When I stand near her or read about her, I personally begin to feel that she represents the connection I have with the goddess of America, expressed through freedom. So to just pause for a moment, because again, for me, this being, a lover of Sophia, a lover of how do we embody the Sophia personally in our communities and in our nation, there's so much richness in what this statue represents as a face of the sacred feminine radiating freedom.
Talk about these four.
So I'll take a minute here to recap a little bit. Upper right is the goddesses of America. One of them is the goddess of freedom. She stands in the east. She's in the far right, going backwards. The second one is Ceres. This is the goddess of fertility. This particular statue stands in the upper reaches of Union Station. So while she is not actually physically in the south, she represents, according to Celtic directions, she represents the energy of the south as fertility, growth. She holds her sheaves of wheat, that Ceres. Moving to the third from the right is the goddess of justice. This particular statue is outside the Supreme Court, and justice is a strong quality of the North. So justice related to the White House. And then the furthest one from the right is the goddess of peace. And we associate her to the West. So this is a template that we've chosen to work with. I say we, there's a group of people who've been working with this map, and we'll do a small version of this meditation before we end and then have some questions. We've set up the map so that there are feminine aspects to the actual north, south, east, west map of the National Mall to invite these gates of universal energy in the four directions to hold a feminine essence along with the very masculine monuments that are marked in the mall. And this goes to where I feel strongly that it's going to partly be the healing power of the feminine, the healing grace of the mother. However, each of us may hold that sacred in our own path and in our own heart and soul, it will be a way that some of these things can get woven together. So this course is something that the Star House is supporting as it's a 21 lesson course. So it's actually an evergreen course that people can do at their own pace, but I thought we'd start it with a group so that we could keep some human contact going. We're in a Star House revival in a lot of ways right now in terms of having launched a new website and lots of courses online, trying to find our way to be effective in sharing the wisdom we care about.
Helping people gather the strengths that everybody needs everybody else to be strong. And the freedom is a good example, because what is true freedom? Is it do whatever you want? What is sovereignty with responsibility? So there is each of these. So freedom, fertility, life force, justice, peace. What are these in their most mature aspects? And we believe, we experience that there are divine beings, there's energies that are available to help us grow up, mature. So that's what the goddesses is. The 21 classes, that's a lot. How long is each one?
It's a 7-week course with 3 lessons a week, which take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes a week to do all 3 lessons. Okay,
so your lessons are kind of brief and sweet. Our lessons for the new astrology are 2 hours each, and really we go into really great detail. There's only 5 of them, not 21.
Right. Well, it's sort of the masculine feminine approach, right?
I guess.
Anyway, so you're more than welcome to explore that on the starhouse.org. And then on the left, you want to talk about series 2 of astrology?
We did series 1, and we recommend before you take series 2, you do series 1. We would love for you to have some basic training in how to read the heavens, interact with the whole top of the sphere of your experience. Everything that's up from horizontal is an active world that can be interacted with, and that can be, especially, we're interested in when you took your first breath. Your first breath, the whole cosmos impacts into every cell of your body. And that's what astrology is based on. It's based on that very powerful primal experience, and how to work with those patterns through the course of your life. So that's, we're very interested in teaching you about astrology. We're we'll go on, and some will stay with us and be able to read charts for other people. We're very happy about that. And we call it the new astrology because it's far superior in our experience to many of the kinds of astrology that are out there. We're very interested in soul-based astrology.
So the other thing that I would say about these two, astrology and the Goddess of America, or StarWisdom and Sophia, is that it's an ongoing laboratory of how do we all find our way of being in the conversation with the wisdom of the stars, with our personal embodiment, and then becoming the vessel that can serve the whole.
And the Star House is a great trainer for that. Actual physical visits to the Star House, which we can do in very small numbers right now. And we can still do that. And it's like an art appreciation class. Really, the more you learn about painting, and then you go to a museum, and it's so much better.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend that we're going to do a maybe 5-minute meditation together. And I want to bring back this image of the Macmillan map.
It's beautiful.
So I want to, I'll share a little bit to kind of bring in some of what we spoke about and saw visually, and invite you to now enact your own sacred imagination as we open some of these gates together. And do a mini version. This is a mini version of a meditation that a group of, I'm going to say 30 plus people do on a regular basis. It's with one of my dearly beloved sisters named Anastasia Nutt, who taught at the Star House for years. And we reconnected after she moved to the East Coast and has been working with some Celtic work with her partner, that we were both drawn, I would say 3-4 years ago, to working with DC as a map. And when we discovered that, we realized, oh, we still have a dharma or a devotion together. And it's been a fabulous kind of coming back after some 20 years of knowing one another. And I just want to honor her in this map and meditation. And we do this as a call every month. And you're welcome to join those calls anytime. It is nothing other than just wanting to share this presence by doing this work as best we can over the distance, working with, we don't actually do it on Zoom, but we do a group call once a month. So you can let me know if you'd like to be informed about the next one. They are Wednesday evenings, sort of the middle Wednesday of the month. So this is a version of that meditation that we're going to do. So I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes and work with me as best you can, given the maps you've seen, the buildings you've seen, taking in a sense of where you sit, letting yourself relax into the gravity and the pull of Sophia, what keeps us drawn to her heartbeat, this mystery of gravity. And then to feel also the levity that pulls your heart and your consciousness to the stars. And taking a few breaths to relax and come to your heart center. And then feeling that collectively we are going to weave our attention together from a place of equanimity, from a place of inner balance between our own masculine, feminine, Christos, Sophia energies, to be a vessel, to weave an energy around this altar of the National Mall, to weave vision and purpose, and to do that with not a sense of agenda, but with a sense of inspired awareness, to weave the unseen world of spiritual intelligence through our human self. So imagine that you are standing in the very, very center with your back against the Washington Monument. The base of the Washington Monument is also 4 squared. And as you face the east with your back against the monument, you can see the Capitol building in the east. And with group intention, we weave and invite in the energies of freedom from the east. Invite in that which the gate of the east represents as the rising sun, as the breath of inspiration, and the element of air. So feeling your heart space connect to the east and inviting in this beautiful energy of freedom. You can perhaps feel a figure 8 or a lemniscate from the east to the Washington Monument. And then envision that we move as a group around to the south and we face the Jefferson Memorial in the south, working with the energies of fertility and of warmth, of the growth forces of noon, the warmth of the sun, and we invite in through this gate of the south the energy of fertility and the wisdom of Jefferson as the author of the words of the Declaration, feeling the Jefferson Memorial and his strong presence, and feeling the feminine nature of growth and fertility as series, and breathing from the heart a figure 8 lemniscate energy, inviting in the south the warmth. And then moving around so our back is up against the west facing side of the Washington Monument, facing west, where we can see clearly the reflecting pools down to the Lincoln Memorial. The gate of the west, the gate of compassion and of peace, works with the energy and the element of water, and breathing in from our heart and out in a figure 8 to the Lincoln Memorial, to all that Lincoln stood for in the establishment of civil rights and the rights of the Black Americans. And in the name of peace, opening to the gate of the west and the healing waters. And feel that lemniscate energy. And to the north, we move around to the north face, feeling the energy of justice, inviting in the energies of earth, the energies of tribal wisdom of the ancestors, the spiritual and Native American influence, the energy of the founders, and of all those who have lived and worked in the White House. We invite in the spirit and the energy of justice in the north, the wisdom of earth, and feeling the weaving of that figure 8 from the center to the north. And then feeling our back is up against this 555-foot obelisk representing something of the Egyptian tradition and the wisdom that comes through that tradition. And we can feel it as a link of heaven to earth, of Christos, or of light of star wisdom moving down deep into the earth as it is high, deep into the heart of the mothers, deep into the body of Sophia, of Gaia, and feeling the presencing from heaven to earth of the unseen world and of the spiritual intelligence that guides all life, that connects to nature and to nature's God, as well as to humanity and our monuments, our visions, our hopes, our deep knowing that freedom, fertility, peace, justice are values worth taking a stand for. We'll just take a moment in silence to feel your connection to this place, to Star Wisdom and Sophia, how it lives in you. And gently coming back.
Good.
So we could take some time to just chat.
If people are up for it, that's, yeah,
People
a
have
little chat would be
thoughts
great.
or responses,
The,
questions.
You know, we all have to work together in some ways. And it's such a delicate thing to find the balance between one person's true offering and their egotism, and, you know, and then another person's readiness to learn, and all of that. We're struggling with all of that. And as we're learning to grow up as individual human beings and as humanity, we're in the 21st century, which is like being 21 years old. So we're all kind of 21, you know, which is having a new sense of adulthood, but also having a new sense of we know everything. And but we have to work with that. There's the freshness of what's coming forward is beautiful. Okay.
So does anyone want to unmute? And I would just invite questions that would be of interest to more people rather than very personal questions, just an invitation.
David and Lila, thank you. This is Susie. I've done this work with you before, but never has it felt so personal and relevant. And so thank you for having held this space with these goddesses and with these energies. And now we can feel them. We can feel them at work and at interaction and at combustion. And so it feels ever more relevant to me than it ever has. So thank you for bringing this work forth. I've heard this many times, but I've never heard it as deeply as I hear it tonight.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Susie. I think that's such an important thing to name. It's like, I know this last 2 weeks for me and many people, and probably for many on this call, it's like we need to not be continually traumatized by some of the visuals that have flooded the media over and over and over again, a little like 9/11, you know, watching repeatedly the towers fall, you know, the towers fall. And the last time we did the DC meditation as a group, we kind of agreed to say, when those images come across our screens or in our minds and memories, to like replace it with energy moving, through the mall, or the energy of the Capitol as the Temple of Freedom, and to reestablish the vision of this place feels so important right now, because we're in such a delicate balance of all the forces that are conspiring. So
Mhm.
I feel our vision towards the Capitol is actually a sacred act.
Absolutely. And to just reemphasize that for me, in my work outside of the Star House and in my own personal life, I have like this whole new normal or all of that. I've had such freedom in letting go of what was, and the expansiveness in embracing the vision of what can be. We are at this critical place where what can be is so phenomenal and such a growth leap. And this internal act that I've been working on to release what was and move towards the vision of what could potentially be has been so freeing. That is the freedom, honestly.
Right
And so
on.
thank you.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. Thanks, Susie.
Partly it's from reading historical documents, such as the Declaration of Independence, or other historical documents. The speeches of Abraham Lincoln are pretty great. And it's also, you have to find a new way of encountering the living being of this moment rising from this land.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it is so great to go to Washington, D.C. and walk those angles and walk those positions and feel those interactions. Some people, the notion of goddesses is very important. The same with sort of StarWisdom, really. There are unseen beings working with us. Well, why don't they show themselves? Because it would be like saying, well, you don't need to go to fourth grade. I'll just do it for you. We'll just give you a diploma for fourth grade. Well, no, it's actually, we need to grow. And there are beings who are encouraging us, but they also don't want to do it for us. So imagine their decision-making process.
Other comments?
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. This is Maria Morales. Thank you for this presentation. I'm a high school. Oh, so sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Maria.
Go ahead, Maria.
Sure. I've had more than one student remark to me that they are embarrassed to call themselves an American citizen. Do you have anything that comes to your mind of what message can be shared to someone who's young? They are not, they're doing college, they're doing high school, they're doing their studies. They are not leaning towards esoteric knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's looking for guidance.
Oh, beautiful question. Beautiful question. I mean, my first response to that would be something about, I think it's actually in some ways okay to be a little embarrassed right now, because we're showing the underbelly of this country, and
a very small number of us are, and that's the problem with the media. But it is being shown. It is coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a small number. I mean, I'm not sure. It's many millions potentially, and including all of us. I mean, I think that there's something about, yeah, I don't know if there's an answer to that, Maria, other than we are in a process. It's like being embarrassed to be a teenager. It happens. And it's also a life stage. And could we just put ourselves in the context of, we're a young country compared to so many countries in the world. And we've presented the persona of being like, the caretaker of the planet. And
right.
There's some, hubris that
right.
We need potentially to kind of be brought back down into a level playing field. So I'm not sure that embarrassment is inappropriate, but to find also something of the vision of what's hopefully still possible And I think this is going to be a really important, I mean, as David says, I mean, we're not into a quick fix right now, but hopefully
Right.
we'll be able to reestablish some of the communications and respect that we've lost.
You know, I think the image of Mother Teresa is very helpful. I mean, many aspects of her life, but one aspect it was very. People said, "Well, why don't you go speak to the UN? Why don't you do this or that?" She said, "I deal with one person at a time. I get off the bus, and there's a person in the street, and I deal with them." Because she's actually from that model. She's opening. She's making a situation where she can open her heart to another human being and observe herself, observe what comes out from herself. So embarrassment about, yeah, you know, in terms of how we're dealing with the climate as a human race, we're befuddled. I mean, you know, you can say that we're going backwards, but you can also say, well, humanity as a whole is still befuddled. No matter how many positive things we do, we're befuddled. So where are you going to find the answers for that? Actually, from what rises from within oneself.
We've had this experience recently of working with some Waldorf graduates, high school graduates in that same age group, perhaps, as you're asking about. And what they've been teaching us is that they start to find the forward movement by understanding what they're here to offer and what their work is in the world. And that may be an important part of it also. It's like how, I mean, we could all probably find some place to run away to for a period of time, but you know, there's really nowhere to go. And
Right.
you know, like the challenges,
Including Mars.
Yeah, the challenges are finding, you know, our calling where we are. And since travel is somewhat limited right now, so I don't know if any of that helps, but they're really,
No, thank you. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Maria.
Shakti.
Shakti.
Hi.
So I'm somewhat new to this way of working with the capital as a temple space, etc. And you were speaking about like holding it like on a higher level, this work that's done on a higher plane that's not necessarily political. It's above the political plane. And then I just wonder like how to relate that to actually, you know, listening to the news and all the things that are happening, because it's also not unrelated to that, since we're doing it because of the huge chaos that's taking place there. So just like on a daily basis, and I actually don't know like how it is that you're working, like if you do these visualizations at specific days when certain things are happening there, or just, you know, while you're listening to the news, or just, so if you have any words about that.
Great question. Thank you. We've actually been doing this for quite a few years before all the chaos. Well, I don't know when there really wasn't chaos in this country since I've been alive. You know, but you know, it's more than just the last 4 years. And it's partly because I feel like there's an opportunity given how many issues we're facing, whether they're economic, political, environmental, though, you know, they've been building over decades. And when I first became aware of DC as something special was like in the late 70s. And then I didn't go back to it until 5, 6 years ago. So there was a big gap in between. And so for me, there's something about, because the 4 directions, because the way we've worked in Star House is so related to the 4 directions, we started to realize, oh, there's a template here that can be worked with the way Star House meditations have worked seasonally. And maybe that's a way in, like when people talk about, well, let's pray for peace. I never actually understood how to pray for peace. because I needed like a template to work with. So it gave, and Star House has been the great teacher for many of us about how to actually ground something in universal principles without being dogmatic about how you're supposed to do it, and all those details. It's like to create the freedom to move within universal principles of north, south, east, west, above and below. So for David and me, and for a lot of people, it actually is a daily part. It's a part of a meditation practice that we do. And then for other people, it's maybe something that they do maybe bring up or have, I keep my own little version of the Capitol building, like close by, so that when I start looking at those images, and a photograph would work, like it's like anything that we're trying to hold a perspective of whatever reminds you. So, I keep this near my computer. So if I'm actually overwhelmed, I stop short now before I reach overwhelm with news feeds, because I don't function very well. This is like my reminder. This is a temple of freedom. I can hold a place of open-hearted connection to just moving energy. I'm not trying to make anything happen. I'm just shifting the flow so that I'm not contracted and stuck. And then when we do a longer version of this visual meditation with a group on a monthly phone call, it fills out and it gets held by enough people that it actually feels like it has some impact. And that helps also, because this isn't like, one or two people are going to ride into the Washington Mall and make a change.
I think one of the great tasks of our own self-education at this time is to become more attuned to the forces. Ancestors would be, as a good tradition, ancestors, beings who are seeking to assist us to deal with situations in a mature manner, and to become more aware of what is there as resource behind us, working through us, and how to let that in, to recognize it, and then to work with it. As important as signing a Greenpeace petition, I would say more important, but that's important too. Many things are important. As important or more important than that is actually what is moving in you, which will affect your interaction daily with other human beings. And your decisions, even the little decisions, what you're buying in the store, how you are conducting your life. Those are the foundations. And not necessarily to write a new manifesto that's better than somebody else's manifesto. That may be an activity, but it may be a huge distraction for many. More is like, what lives in me? And if I feel then this immense passion to act, then to go with that.
We talk a lot about sacred activism, and I think in
Right.
a way part of the inquiry is like what does call to us in this unfolding mandala of all that needs tending in the world right now. Like, where do we show up? And this particular practice may be a calling to some people on this call, and it may not be for others. It's we're doing our best to kind of offer ways that collective consciousness can work together, whether it's through StarWisdom or some of the other offerings on the Star House site, that start to build a sacred culture where we can work with perennial wisdom to create an offering. Really, that's how I see it, is like creating an offering and then letting it go so that my agenda isn't hooked to it, and that the offering is helping me stay in a more positive state of mind that keeps me from feeling victimized and numb and paralyzed. So those are sort of my first ground of responding to whether it's a news cycle or a new moon cycle or an astrological moment like a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Is like all of it is a bit of a laboratory of conversation. Who are we talking to? and why?
I know it's getting on in time, but if you're ready for an esoteric edge, you may not be ready for this, but I'll just say that that's out there. There are people who are actually spirits, ancestors, people who have passed on, who are actually reviewing their lives over a short time or a long time, who are feeling suddenly they're waking up to the truth of their actions in the world. Maybe they've recently passed away, or maybe they're slaveholders from a couple centuries ago. They need help. They need need to be met compassionately, because that kind of immense feeling of, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake, and look at all the things I did, kind of holds them back. And you can meet them and actually help them move on in this growing development of humanity and of this country. That's one of the great, when Pluto opens the gates of the shadow, one of the great things that comes out are these prejudices of race, against indigenous people. That often comes from pain. The people who kill indigenous people are almost always come from a place where they've been very deeply soul hurt. So, everybody needs a kind of forgiveness, but it's not a blanket thing. It is actually, these are encounters that you can have in your meditation, in your waking life even. So that's an edge there that you can think about pursuing. And again, you have allies to do that, whom you can become more familiar with. Okay.
Let's do one more question.
I
was trying to read the feed here. There's some really fabulous
yes.
things, and in the nature of this call, I'm not going to be able to get to all of those, but
Right.
but I'm appreciating them. So one other comment. You know it's you if your heart's beating loudly.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for making us conscious of the enchanted landscape of Washington, D.C. And it comes from a very ancient and noble tradition, at least as far back as ancient Egypt. And it is a mythology that our logical minds may have trouble with. And we want to recognize that we're entering the kingdom of air. And so a great exercise is to breathe and to feel. Because as we're bombarded by images and we're confused by so many ideas that people are attached to, a good exercise is to remember we're entering the kingdom of air, and if we breathe and we feel before we react, we get some choice as to how we want to react. And this is a really crucial way to move forward now, so that our heart's open, we're feeling how we want to respond to people, because we're sort of, as the age of Earth is ending, a 200-year period of the great conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn. The last 200 years have been in the Earth signs. We can see, the Earth signs are really about developing the Earth, building the Earth, examining the Earth. But we're leaving that kingdom and we're entering the kingdom of air, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. And this is really about knowledge and about society and Libra's justice and balance and making sure that there's equanimity. So as we're getting through the chaos of one age ending and another age crowning to be born, we're the undertakers and the midwives. And so remember to breathe and to open your heart to feel how you want to respond. And that's the best advice I can give. So thank you.
Thank you, Sir Franklin.
You, Franklin. That's lovely. I was reading your commentary in the chat too. And
Right.
yeah, it's really true. And I feel like, you know, the caduceus and the wings that show up in your screen there, it's like that's such a beautiful essence of the East and the sense of breath and freedom, and also gives us this opportunity to move out of the two-ness being conflict, and to realize that somehow we're going to weave ourselves into communications and conversations and listening and responding rather than reacting. And that feels like part of the work right now. We're clearly living in a very polarized picture, and we have to keep listening to one another. And that means actually listening to someone who thinks differently than we think, you know, because otherwise we're just going to keep ending up in these camps that won't have that flow. So yeah, I appreciate much of what you're saying, and yeah, towards breath and freedom. And breath is actually the most powerful spiritual tool we have access to. No question.
I love that you're talking about the goddesses and how essential this is. And one way this relates is that logos, the masculine rational mind, has a counterpart, the lunar irrational feminine mind. And when we hear irrational, you know, we get really nervous because the dominating rational mind has a hard time embracing this feminine mind, which is the dream time, the intuition, but it's called mythos. It's the stories. It's stories that give us the moral, the lessons, right? Science can only take us so far. We need to embrace the goddess, the intuitive, feminine heart wisdom, because without that, we're lost. The mind will just take us into an endless war. So we're in an age when this divine feminine is like coming forward with great wisdom and power. And that is really what the world is, you know, hinging on. And this is where we are.
All right. Well, StarWisdom and Sophia. I mean, I think
StarWisdom
that's
and
exactly fits what you're responding to there. So thank you for that. So we just
We need to
invite you to
finish
go to
up
the
our
starhouse.org
to
and
thestarhouse.org.
and if you know if further pursuit either now or in the future of, you know, sort of joining and contributing to this laboratory of the goddesses of America, would wholeheartedly welcome that. We're also really looking for, I don't know if I'm still planning on a 2021 spiritual journey to DC. We've done several in the past years. And they've been just, number one, an enormous amount of fun. And number two, really enlightening to be able to rediscover the nation that this is, and that we are in such a process of becoming.
Not only the wise words, but the wise places. Okay.
Okay, friends, I think we're going to just kind of sign off, and really appreciate your time and attention. And perhaps Debbie will help me figure out a way to pulse out this as a video. I know a few people wanted copies of it.
This will be recorded, and so some people came in late, and we'll be sending out a link for this. You can see the beginning.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Blessings.
you for sharing your time. Thank you for
I'm
sharing
going to
your time.
bring up the gallery view, and you know, you can wave goodbye or, or
waving is a good thing. Yeah. Yay.
Blessings on Martin Luther King Day. What a great
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you
for
so much.
joining.